Okay, thanks everybody for coming here. As was mentioned, this is a panel for increasing access to capital for underrepresented entrepreneurs and groups. We're lucky enough to have a very esteemed panel here and very accomplished panel. So I'll go ahead and introduce each one of them, and then we can kick things off. So first we have Alicia Castillo Holley here, who is a very accomplished entrepreneur, investor. She's the founder and CEO of Wealthing Institute, and also an angel investor through Sandhill Angels, which is a well-known Silicon Valley group. Next we have Brian Dixon, who is a principal over at Kapor Capital, long-standing seed investment fund, and Brian there works with their portfolio companies and also reviewing deals and deal flow and making investments. And to my left we have Hunter Walk, who's founder and general partner at a seed stage investment fund called Homebrew. Prior to that he worked for YouTube, I believe. Yes, YouTube and Google before that. So extremely accomplished as well. Then we have Kate Mitchell, who is a founding partner at Scale Ventures. She's a former chair of the National Venture Capital Association and is also very relevantly heading the diversity initiative at the NVCA.
A lot of people here.
And then last but not least, we have Marlon Nichols, who's an investor at Intel Capital, rising star there, also has a fund called CrossCultureVC Ventures that he's investing with. And we're happy to have Marlon on our panel as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and kick things off. And as I mentioned, so this is a panel for increasing access to capital. And as everyone knows, access to capital is a crucial component of having a successful venture of any type of startup, of any type of industry. And so with it, you can obviously not only execute on your business plan and your growth and development model, but it also, you become a part of a new ecosystem of a funded company, which can open up all kinds of doors in terms of relationships, in terms of networking and strategic, endeavors that can really help your business move forward. So it's a crucial area, and I think it's very relevant here. So I think, I could say a little bit about myself. I've been in Silicon Valley since '97. I'm a partner at a law firm called Gunderson Dettmer, representing startups and venture capitalists. And I've certainly been front and center in seeing how important capital really is to entrepreneurs. And and also not only just, as I mentioned, having the ability to execute with your company, but just the psychology associated with it, and whether or not you're able to actually get that capital to get going. And many entrepreneurs, I think, if you don't have, if you don't feel like there's a perception there that you might not even have access to it, some ideas and great innovation might not even get off the ground or even start. So it's really sort of at the foundation of any sort of successful venture. So we have all heard all the statistics and things in terms of the lack of access to capital. 1% African Americans are venture-backed businesses. I believe it's around 4% for Latinos. The data for women is staggering as well. And I guess I'll just kind of open it up to the panel a little bit to see if someone wants to speak to why we think that's the case, and why. Are there certain barriers that are unique to entrepreneurs that are of minority backgrounds or women or gender based that might contribute to that?
I can add quickly, just because there are more statistics here on this topic. Well, two things I want to add, by the way. I'm also on the board of, does this work? I don't know if either of them are working. Silicon Valley Bank, and also a member of Broadway Angels, really learning how to be an angel investor. So I can speak to all those. But in my capacity at the National Venture Capital Association, and the statistics are very similar, that there are only 4 to 6%, depending on which study you look at, of female investing partners partners, and somewhere between 1% to 2% each for Black and Hispanic investors as well. So I think, sadly, this really mirrors then what you see on the investing side. So I think that is one beginning answer to that, which is one of the reasons that at the National Venture Capital Association we're starting what I'm chairing. Carla Newell in the audience is also a member. Tara Lyons from OSTP at the White House has been really active in helping. There are probably others in the room I can't see who've been active. Wayne Sutton has been involved in some of these activities. But at the National Venture Capital Association, leading a diversity task force, and I'm trying to rename it Inclusion and Diversity Task Force. I like that way of thinking, particularly when it comes to investing. But in any event, we think of that in relation to our composition, because the better our composition is, the more likely it's going to be that the composition of entrepreneurs changes. And secondly, what we do as board members to impact the composition of our startups. So that's really the objective overall. But sad place to start. The good news is the only direction is up, so we need to get on with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. Oh,
I jump in. Is this working? This is working, right?
I think people hear Marlon. Yeah.
Perfect. So a lot of people say, you know, venture capital is broken. I like to say it's limited, right? Mm-hmm. So if you think about where VCs go to find their deals, they go through the general or the usual VC network. They go to the Ivy League schools. They go find alumni of Silicon Valley startup darlings, or folks that were at some of the biggest tech companies around. And that's the pool of entrepreneurs that they pull from, right? Which is great sometimes, and it helps them to find the best entrepreneurs in that group. The problem is they're not finding the overall best entrepreneur. So I think one way to kind of combat this is to expand where we look for deals, right? So why not go and visit historically Black colleges for computer science majors? Why not work with governments in the Caribbean that are focused on trying to push up entrepreneurship? Why not look for new problems that need to be solved, as opposed to piling on to the same company one after the next? So I think I think the issue is just being a little bit too close-minded, and I think you're right. If you add the right level of diversity to your partnership, then you can start to recognize that, yeah, there are some problems in other places that need to be tackled, and you know where to go and look and find folks that are trying to build solutions for those problems. And I think that's going to be a great place to start.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's not just good for the investing to change, it's smart. We're missing, looking at the changing demographics, and we know, look at the real estate prices and the talent prices in the Bay Area. We're in a talent war. If we're not addressing this huge population out there, we're missing opportunities from the U.S. economic perspective, and from, narrowly speaking, any venture firm's perspective, if we're only looking at a small pool. So that's why it's critical.
As a new seed fund, we're about 2.5 years old, and there's my partner and myself, so we're try to make a smaller number of focused investments, which means we're not necessarily going to campuses or being able to spend a lot of resources on an operations staff that can help us do this. We sort of flip it a little bit. We think it's our problem that those numbers are so low, not the sort of challenges of entrepreneurs to find us. Because if we want to be a multi-decade fund, I don't think we can outperform just going through the networks of people that I know from Google, or the folks who are maybe already plugged into the venture community. So I'd say in our sort of first year or two, it was just about starting to gain the data and build our own deal flow funnel. But as we look and sort of set our objectives for sort of year 3, year 4, we've become, I guess, sort of short-term intentional and long-term intentional. Short-term intentional for us is, as sort of a white guy and an Indian guy, just trying to be out there and involved with the communities where we think a diverse set of entrepreneurs are seeking advice. So mentoring and volunteering through organizations like Code 2040, ensuring that when opportunities like this present itself, that we show up. Longer term, the way that I think about it, and at the seed stage, I think some of the most interesting relationships happen before somebody has started a company. Are you a venture investor that they maybe got to know through the company that they were working at previously, the startup they were at previously? So we brought on a head of talent, and one of the things that she's focused on is helping our companies think about inclusive hiring practices, because the more diverse the employee base of the companies we work with, those are the people I want to be writing checks to in Fund 3 and Fund 4. So in my mind, that's sort of, the planting some seeds that bring us into communities and into relationships that maybe we don't have access to yet. But I put it on our shoulders to sort of track, understand, and improve, at the very least, our top of the funnel metric. And if we don't do that, I don't think we can be a successful fund.
I'll jump in as well and say, putting an open call out there of we're looking for diversity, and we want to build a diverse portfolio. I think that helps so much. At Kapor Capital, we get into deals sometimes that we probably wouldn't have got into because we bring that angle to it. Also, our focus on impact is so important for, hey, I'm raising $1 million round, and I know that by having Kapor Capital as an investor, whether it's a board decision or any important decision, that will be there for you. I'll say this also, some of the best deals come from your portfolio, the founders of your portfolio. And when your portfolio is the 1% or 2%, you're not going to see many of those high quality deals. And I think we've benefited from having over 48% of our portfolio is either a person of color or a woman founder. And the deals that they refer are some of the highest quality deals. And it's truly an advantage for us to get into deals that we probably wouldn't have even seen.
So one other thing I'd say, partnerships are really close-knit, and it's a difficult thing to say, you need to go and recruit someone that doesn't look like you don't necessarily know, you don't get along with, into your partnership. So if that's the position you're going to take, not necessarily the right one, but if that's the position you're going to take, then I would encourage you. At CrossCulture, you've got myself, you got Trevor Thomas, you got Troy Carter. Over at Kapor Capital, you have Brian. You have folks that are close to these communities that understand some of these challenges. If you're not going to invest internally, at least reach out to folks like us to learn about the market, to learn about the challenges, and go after those opportunities.
So that's a really good point and segue. I think it's very clear that in order to move forward, there need to be, amongst venture capitalists and amongst seed investors and angels, much more of an embracing of the idea that truly diversity is actually not only good for from a cultural perspective, an organizational perspective, but frankly, from an economic perspective. I guess where we could take that is thinking a little bit more about, just tactically for the folks here. You mentioned, Marlon, that there are a few people of color that are, and women venture capitalists that maybe would be a good group for this group here to have access to. What would you tell them in terms of tactical steps around, hey, I'm a first-time entrepreneur. I packed up and moved from the East Coast, from North Carolina. I came out here. I've got a great idea. Where do I start? Not to put you on the spot.
No, I'd say, like with anything, right? If you're gonna go and interview for a traditional job, you do your research, right? Different venture funds focus on different things. So you need to make sure you're first and foremost approaching the right fund for you. The two funds that I'm affiliated with, so take Intel Capital, for instance, right? If you have an idea, right, Intel Capital is probably not the best place for you to start, right? Because we focus more on growth stage companies, right? Intel is a machine, and you get the most out of our investment when we can plug you into that machine. And if you're just at the ideation phase, there's not a whole lot that we can do for you. Obviously there are exceptions, but generally speaking, that's the case. Take CrossCulture now, on the other hand, we're a lot earlier in the companies that we look to invest in and invest in. So there it's a matter of understanding what's our thesis, right? What are the things that move us? What are the partners' backgrounds and interests? What does our portfolio look like? Understand those things and figure out how you could fit in. And I think there's a lot more I could say, but I don't want to hog the mic. That's a great start.
Yeah, I'll jump in. First step, if you're creating a tech company, and I imagine there's a few in the room, by show of hands. All right, so keep hands up. If you have a CTO, keep your hand up if you have a CTO. And I think, well, there's still a lot of hands up, which is a good thing. Well, we see this all the time, right? I'm going out, we're creating a tech company, and the lack of a CTO. And it's really hard for any investor, especially at the seed stage, and even angels, to invest in a product that isn't built yet and might not be built without having a CTO. And I'm not saying it's easy to find a CTO. I think the second step is really warm intros. Create a list of investors that you do want to approach. Do the steps that Marlon kind of laid out of, is this a right fit? Do they have a competitor in their portfolio already? And as you create that list, get warm intros, whether using LinkedIn, whether using mentors, to make the introduction. Because I answer an email from anybody on this panel pretty quickly, and I think when you're sending an email just to info@, sometimes you don't really get a good response. So I think those are two steps that everybody in this room can do to really have a higher success rate.
One point of distinction. So there are tech companies, and then there are tech-enabled companies, right? So I just want to, if you're starting a tech company, then what Brian said is absolutely spot on. You need to have someone technical on your team. If it's a tech-enabled business, in other words, you're leveraging existing technology to put forth some type of product, less important. Then it's more about, is your background, is there something unique in your background that makes you overly qualified to go off and start this business, and have me believe that you will be successful in doing so.
I have some questions, some observations too. Right? Can you hear me? Yeah. So there's entrepreneurs and there's entrepreneurs, and if you're going to reach out for venture capital, think about it like going to the Olympics. You have to be well prepared, and you have to educate yourself. And that's one thing that I see often. There's places in the world where the venture capital industry is not well developed. I started the first seed capital fund in Chile many years ago, and we had to create the industry. And so we spent a lot of time educating the people. You have the luxury here of having a lot of resources. Internet is way developed now, and so you can have access to a lot of resources. Educate yourself. We don't invest in minorities, we invest in talent. So you might have a lot of good intentions, but you also have to have the competence. If you're thinking about starting a company, or if you're starting a company and you have never done that, try to get yourself an advisory board. That's much better than having a proper board. It's easier for people that would like to mentor you from many reasons. And try to ask them smart questions. So if, for example, we have, I get a lot of people that want to get angel investing, because that's what I'm doing now, and they don't know what a convertible note is. That's a very specialized concept. I don't have to teach that. Go and find yourself the 15 concepts that you need to master before you go and start talking to somebody. So that's something that immediately would get you from being intentional to being competent. And that's one thing that I see not only in minorities, in everybody. So that is the one thing that I think could make a difference. Educate yourself and build up that competence, not only the confidence, but the competence. And then you can go and you start asking questions. One thing that I also see that works towards improving the minorities in venture capital or in seed capital is the fact that you will be remembered if you are good. So use that to your advantage. This is great because I've been to many panels where I'm the only woman. I was telling Brian, not a lot of people know that I'm Hispanic Australian, so that is another thing that I'm invited to. Now we see more diversity, but when you see somebody that is talented and has done their job, and wants to succeed, you want to help them because they are usually not good. They are outstanding, and they have resilience. They've been through a lot of turmoil, like migrant crisis in Europe. You will have people who are very, very resilient. Failure is not going to be an option for them. So you want to help them out, but they need to prove to you that they want to be worthy of being helped, because you only have a certain amount of time. You don't have a lot of time. So be smart about that. Be smart about preparing yourself using any online resource that you can use some advisory board, and think about it like stages. And then when you go to venture capital, think about the athletes that want to go to the Olympics. Just prepare yourself. The other thing is take rejection with elegance. Have the capacity to understand that if somebody's telling you, this is not for me, you want to learn from that. This is like free consulting, so learn from that. It's like, why? I can't remember the amount of times that I spent talking to people for free about their business model, well, maybe you can do this, maybe you can do that, and they go away and they send you an email and say, yes, but I want funding. And it's so true. And I think all of us have been there. So take rejection and criticism with elegance. We don't want to criticize you because we want to criticize you. We really want to help you. So we're seeing things that might not be appropriate for you because it's our background, but take that as a learning opportunity.
Yeah, Alicia, I agree completely with this idea of doing as much homework as possible, and I would add to it, there are a lot of programs in addition to doing online research. Build Up is an organization. Wayne's here. You guys, I think, all know him. Rainbow Push has a business plan competition. I think this year they're going to do it in the first quarter. Manos Initiative is a Latino-focused accelerator. There are lots of places to go and get as much help as you possibly can. And I think through that, one of the things, and I think this is really valuable for all of us, I mean, I don't know what the statistics are for my peers, but we probably get, even of the plans we log in, and by the way, some things are so way out of our focus, to your point, Marlon, that we don't even log them in. We track this on Salesforce, but I think we get 8,000 plans and we invest in 8 to 12 a year. So the volume and our ability to connect with everybody is obviously quite limited. So it is better when you come to me and you're in my area of focus, and in our case, earlier than Intel, but later than CrossCulture, meaning the first, as you're just beginning revenue, the first dollars of revenue. So that can be pretty far along in your even 100,000 in revenue might be pretty far along in your life cycle. But I think the first distinction is, what kind of company do I have? Is it something, and this is probably for me, I don't know about you guys, the biggest distinction, really good, what might be great, I don't want to even say lifestyle companies, but where you can make a good living, but aren't the kind of profile that makes sense from a venture point of view. And particularly with tech-enabled companies, like e-commerce. There's some great e-commerce companies that could be great ways for you to learn, where you might be able to get crowdfunding as an example, and by the way, be creative about where you get your capital. An angel in your region, or who you know, might be willing to help sponsor you in that, but it really may not be a high-growth company. So that's one of the first pieces of homework, is first learn the business, but also take that network and take the people that you're starting to interact with, including your peers, and say, is this really a large, high-growth company? You do want to be the Googles and the YouTubes of the world. Is my company that's selling crocheted, little things for my table really going to be as big as Google and YouTube? No, it might be a really good business for me, and I might, with the internet, be able to go worldwide, and that might be able to be crowdfunded. I don't mean to be joking about crochet stuff, but whatever it is.
Anyone in the audience is starting a crochet business.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I'm not your audience, obviously.
Go for it.
But
prove her wrong.
I'm using kind of a ridiculous. I've had toilet seat covers as an example. That was a new one. Like, really, toilet seat covers? Wow. But that's the other piece of being prepared. So when you're in these kinds of communities, an event like this, one of the questions to ask people in the beginning of getting feedback, and go to the friends that I always consider my best friend is the one who tells me I have spinach on my teeth. Yeah. Go to the friend who will say, like Marlon would say to me, Kate, that's a really great idea, but It's not going to get fun. I see why you care. I know, but I got to tell you, you need to rethink it. It's not. If I pitched cross-culture, it wouldn't fly. That is the best advice I can ever get, and I should be open to that. So I think that's the other piece of this. Take advantage of resources, and as part of your even pre-pitch learning, really think what kind of business. And they all have potential paths to success, but be realistic. Are you moderate growth or high growth?
No, excellent, excellent. So I think we've got 5 minutes. Did you?
Oh, I mean, I was just going to say, I was thinking about the folks that we've funded who are first-time entrepreneurs, some of whom come from underrepresented segments, others of whom look like me. My standard joke is when people ask, like, how'd you get into venture? I'm like, tall, white, worked at Google, went to Stanford, like.
Yeah.
I had to turn them, I had to fight off the offers. I think for first-time entrepreneurs, the things that get us across that line of trying to make that sort of commitment, that conviction, because when we invest, we invest at the stage at which companies are more likely to fail than succeed, right? So you're trying to make a decision of what gives us the conviction that this team has a over-indexed chance of succeeding. And it's usually two things. It's momentum and talent, right? So momentum is about creating both the feel, the pull that this is a business that is growing, and I am being invited in to help you grow, rather than this is something that exists on a PowerPoint deck where unless it gets blessed by an investor, it's not going to happen. Nobody wants to fund a company that wouldn't otherwise exist. People want to jump on companies that are growing quickly. So that just happens. I think that can be conveyed by sort of building a relationship sometimes ahead of funding and starting to talk about, here's what I'm intending to do, and then coming back to me and telling me what you learned, how you did it. I much rather have those dots and be able to connect those points than just sort of see you once and evaluate you, by what you've put on a piece of paper. The second thing I think really has a lot to do with team, and sometimes you're coming with a fully formed team, but more often than not, it might be you, a co-founder, somebody who's working for you on the side, and especially if you're not necessarily coming from one of the Valley companies where people feel like they can reference check you or know that you might be able to, hire the team you worked with once you're funded. I think of it this way, like bringing great people on board is one of the sort of next risk factors that post-funding you're going to need to solve for. And so there's always a slide that talks about use of funds, right? It's like, well, we're going to hire an iOS dev. Be like, great, who? I'd be like, no, somebody, they start to tell me the skills they want. I'm like, no, you don't, like, who are you going to hire? And the best answer is, there's this person I worked for who was in my fraternity, or who I met through a networking group, and they've been starting to work on the side, and I think as soon as I can start paying them a salary, they're going to jump on board. Next best answer is, I've got a list of 10 people that I worked with or I'm 1 degree removed from that I'm starting to spend time with. Next degree removed is, I just moved out here. I don't really have a deep network yet, but I posted a job description for this company that doesn't yet exist, and I got 100 responses from my university alumni group and Craigslist, and in the minute I get out of this meeting with you, I'm going to start prioritizing them and talking to them. The worst answer is, well, I'm going to start that after I raise funding. It's like, well, I want to see something happening, right? So I think there's lots of ways to create, that perception of momentum in a way that's not just smoke and mirrors, but actually will help you build a business that doesn't require you having gone to Stanford and having access to sort of your graduating class of CS majors, or having worked at Facebook and being able to pull from that community a bunch of resumes that look and feel more typical of what unfortunately at the time now like the makeup of a founder tends to be. And so I would just urge people to be don't be afraid to be really creative in terms of how you display that momentum and talent that you're going to be able to pull together, because no matter how great you are, like it's not, the company's not just going to be built on your shoulders, it's going to be built on your ability to start to put that team around you.
Excellent. Thank you. Very actionable items there. So we wanted to go ahead and possibly open it up for some questions. So just go ahead and raise your hands. I think I saw a hand back there first. In the corner, red shirt.
How's everybody doing? My name is Justin Bethune. I'm with Dropbox. I work on the business side and do some diversity work. My question actually is a little bit around talking about diversity from a VC standpoint. And I know, you hear a lot of things like Andreessen will talk about, when we look for like principals and we look for partners, we look for people who are, in fact, startup founders, right? And so we all know that the lack of diversity in the actual startup founding culture isn't very broad, right? So my idea and my question is, like, what are your thoughts about, from a VC standpoint, when it goes to recruiting and you're looking to like bring people on? And I know, Brian, your firm is really focused on getting the connection as far as like the importance of investing in those type of like diversity and minority-owned startups. So kind of like broadly, your thought process on actually getting people inside your firm to kind of change perception and change the way you're looking for startups to fund. Yeah,
so I'll jump in. If you look at who's doing the funding on our team, it's a team of 5. 3 out of the 5 are people of color, and 2 out of the 5 are women. And we're hiring right now, so we've got 3 open roles if anybody in this room is looking for an associate, an analyst, and a portfolio service director. So that's one way we make open calls for hiring all the time. I think the second thing that we've done is we've made a pledge to invest $40 million over the next 3 years. And 25 of that going to direct investments, and the other 6 really just going to the pipeline and education, and then a $9 million bet on the ecosystem, events like this, having convenings. I think a part of it is just having this open door, and that's kind of the approach that we've taken to it. Of if you leave the door open, everybody can come through, and that's from a hiring standpoint, a funding standpoint, and kind of where we actually invest the dollars.
I would say, though, as you are rightly pointing out, Kapor is the exception, not the rule. Mm-hmm. And if every firm was like Kapor, we would be in a very different circumstance. At scale, we're half women, and all the men are foreign-born, and Europe, Russia, South Africa, and Germany. So we, too, are closer to where you are. We don't have Latino or blacks on our team, so we're less diverse than they are. One of the things that I'm trying to do, and our firm is trying to do, and a number of folks who are in the audience here are trying to do within the venture community, is close that gap. And I think there are 2 ways for us to think about doing it. One is, we've started this August at the White House Demo Day, sponsored by the Office of Science and Technology Policy. Some leaders of the industry, including Andreessen Horowitz, are beginning to make commitments about diversity. And it's hard with a small firm to say, oh, all of a sudden I can fabricate X partners. That's a long time to get. But there are things that people can do that are very concrete, like interacting with communities. We've committed, because our gap is in the Black and Hispanic communities at scale. So as an example, what we committed was to do 20 hours of faculty or mentoring work a month across our partnership that increases our contact. It is more likely that I end up connecting with people that will either be in my portfolio or will work with us. And we couple that with it could be the Rooney-Murray rule. The Murray rule relates to women. I'll speak of the Rooney rule used in the NFL, which says in my final slate of any candidate we're hiring at scale, there has to be a person of color. At the minimum, what that's going to do, what's going to happen, and by the way, this happened with a peer of ours who hired their first woman in their fund. By forcing that, they found the best candidate in that case was woman. At the very minimum, though, the person is increasing their contact with women and minorities and beginning to build that pipeline they need to increase over time. So I think that at the minimum, that contact and that regular network is hopefully going to bridge that gap, because again, it's about return, and that's something we all talked about. But it's going to be a long-term process, and we've got to make it. And you'll hear some more things in the fall where we commit the whole industry to have these kinds of activities.
Yeah, so can I?
Yeah, I think maybe 1 minute.
1 minute, keep it short, all right.
Yeah.
So yes, all right, that's one approach. And on the Intel side, we're doing that, right? So $125 million fund focused on companies that are founded and led by women and ethnic minorities. That's one way. there's another way, right? And it's just ingraining in folks that it just makes good business sense to invest in diversity, right? In corporate America, many studies, and it shows that the highest performing companies, the highest performing teams have a diverse makeup because they have diverse and they have a very diverse viewpoints, right? They understand it. At CrossCulture, we do not have a focus to invest in minority or women-led companies. We have a focus to invest in the best companies that are going to create tomorrow's next big brands. It just so happens that of our first 5 investments, 4 of them are led by African Americans, right? And that's because they're tackling problems that no one else has tackled in the past. So we see that as the opportunity to create new markets, which will result in outsized returns for us and our investors, period.
Excellent. So unfortunately, I think there's probably a lot of questions, and maybe some of the panelists will stay around for a little while to answer some questions. So I'd encourage you to reach out. But thank you, and
we need to have more of these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are a lot of good questions.
Absolutely, this is great discussion.
Great. Thank you.